Hi everybody, we are back today with another video, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys a new product that I received, and I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about what this product can do. So stay tuned, but let's go ahead and jump right into today's video. All right, so we are unboxing the Resiners Tumbler Curing Machine. So they sent me this machine and a few of their fine glitters, which we're not going to use for today's tutorial, but we're going to go ahead and get started with unboxing this. So this is supposed to cure your tumblers quicker than it would take for you to just have it on your normal turner, okay? So I would assume similar to that of a Wanvi if anyone is familiar with that product. Now, I've never used a Wanvi before, so I'm not quite sure how that works, but I am going to show you, of course, how this works. So everything comes pretty nicely packaged. This shipped to me really quickly. It really comes easy to assemble, which we all know I enjoy because I'm not the put it together kind of girl, like, let's be honest. So I'm kind of excited to show you guys a little bit about what this can do. So it does come also with a silicone mat, and kind of all of the walls of this fold, which I think is just kind of like, it's really kind of cool. So I'm just kind of unpackaging all the items. So it comes in two sections. It comes with the bottom section, which has all of the walls attached to it, and that acrylic piece will need to insert your arms into. And then this is the top portion, which is actually what is sort of the heat element of the product, which is going to cure your epoxy much quicker. So we're going to go ahead and get this assembled. Now, it did come with directions, but it didn't really give, like, gave just kind of picture directions. There's not really a lot in this pamphlet that I would say as information as to like what this product does. So I did just, a bunch of trial and error, just trying to figure out how this works, how this functions. Obviously pretty self-explanatory. You set it up, you put the walls up, you put the top on, you plug it in, and you turn it on. So pretty simple. There isn't really a huge need for instructions, I suppose, but you're not going to get a whole lot out of that pamphlet, if that makes sense. It does, though, come with a 12-month warranty, which is the first card that I showed you. So it does come with a 12-month warranty, which I think is kind of cool. Not a lot of products come with those kinds of things, or if it does, it's like a couple months. So that's kind of nice to know as well. It also came with these little sort of like acrylic pieces that I wasn't really sure what they were for. And then I figured out that they were actually like risers for those of us who have single cup turners or dual cup turners that just have a little bit of a thicker base or a taller base to be able to put this under the tumbler curing machine. So once you put all the walls up, there is this open area which you're seeing me mess with in the front, and this acrylic piece that is in the front kind of goes right over top. It does also come with a silicone mat, of course, to keep things nice and clean and tidy, which I thought was pretty cool. And then once you've got all the walls up, you've gotten the acrylic piece on, you've got your silicone mat in, you're gonna go ahead and snap the lid on. So this took a little bit just because every time I would try and put one corner down, one of the other corners would like misalign, and then I'd have to go back. So as long as all of the corners are touching, it really is easy to get this to snap on. But for whatever reason, I was struggling a little bit. So really easy and simple setup. And so I wanted to show you kind of this front view too. And so what I thought was really cool about this is this acrylic front piece actually has magnets. So it's magnetized right to those posts that are at the top corner there, and those two holes there are for where you'd put the arm of your tumbler. So of course we're going to test this, and we're going to be using a tumbler that I've been working on that of course I've made no progress on. We're going to go ahead and use this tumbler that I've been working on, and we're going to use my favorite and go-to epoxy, and that is Flynn Sisters Supply Shop epoxy. We are of course going to use the Artist Cure because we want to be able to prove, I want to be able to prove that this product actually works and that it's going to be useful in my sort of setting, in my craft world. So we're of course going to use the Artist Cure formula. We're going to pour equal parts of part A and part B. I mixed up a total of 30 mLs for this. And so you're going to watch me epoxy this tumbler twice because the first time I just wasn't quite sure I was believing what I was seeing. So I'll kind of explain that as we go on, but we're going to go ahead and just get this epoxied. So epoxy process is always the same for me. And I made sure to keep it the same for both tests that I kind of did with this product on the same tumbler. But I have gone ahead and mixed up again, equal parts part A, part B. We're working with 30 mLs here. I'm going to mix this for about 5 minutes. I'm going to mix it until there are no ribbons in the epoxy, which would be my uncured epoxy. So once it's nice and clear, there are no ribbons, it's not cloudy any longer, then I know that this is ready to go for me to apply on the tumbler. Once this is fully mixed, we'll go ahead and apply this to the cup. I always typically do thin coats of epoxy on my tumblers, and that is because I just find that it works better that way, that when I'm epoxying cups, the thinner the coat, the better. Now, I don't mean so thin of a coat that you can't tell it's there, but enough of a layer of epoxy that, number one, it's not dripping, right? I don't have too much epoxy that's literally pooling off, but enough epoxy that the tumbler is slick to the touch on all parts of the cup, okay? So that is kind of how I do tumblers. And that's kind of how I've always done tumblers. I always get much better results, and you will get much better results with Flynn Sisters Supply Shop epoxy when you do thinner coats, especially if you're choosing to use the Fast Sat formula. But just something to be mindful of and keep in mind. This is kind of what we're doing. So I won't be using the full 30 mLs. I think I had about 10 mLs left, which I just ended up pouring in a mold that I have over at my typical epoxy station. So that is typically what I do with any extra epoxy. And so this didn't need the full 30 mLs because this is a vinyl wrap tumbler with the only glitter being on the bottom of the cup. So I didn't expect to need all 30 mLs for this first coat of epoxy. So once this is fully covered in epoxy, of course, before we do anything else like getting this set up in the machine, I am going to go ahead and torch this. So using my propane torch in order to torch this, and this is going to help remove any bubbles that are on the surface of the tumbler. Very important so that you don't end up with a cup that is full, I should say, of micro bubbles, which nobody wants to see. So we'll go ahead and get this torched really quickly. And then I will show you how I'm going to set this in the tumbler curing machine. So the setup was a little bit awkward because I am using my main table space that I craft with. And so because the plug is kind of in the front of my table here, it was a little bit awkward to get this set up because both plugs were kind of, I had to pull it that way and then kind of maneuver the cup turner to swing around, if that makes sense. So what I did was I kind of put the tumbler in first, tumbler in first, put it on top of the base of my turner, and then I added those risers on all four corners just to make sure that stays level. We're going to put the acrylic piece in. It snaps right in because it's magnetic, and then we'll go ahead and click on, okay? So after an hour, I came out here. Now I am doing this in the evening. So this is why we're going to end up doing 2 tests. So after the first hour, I came out just to do like a feel test, just to see how things were going, right? How fast is this going to work? From what I understand, it's supposed to cure your tumbler in 2 hours, and I wanted to see. So after this first test, I was able to touch this cup, and it was only tacky. Now, of course, I'm using my gloves, but I could tell that it wasn't tacky, that it was just tacky. It wasn't dripping. It wasn't, stringy, which sometimes will happen, within the first few hours of your epoxy just starting to set. But at this point, this is just tacky. So we're going to go ahead and let this go for another hour, and then we're going to come back. So what I have learned is that the machine does turn off at that 2-hour mark, which is what they say this product will cure your entire tumbler in. So at this point, this is just about fully cured, okay? And so it was just shy of the 2-hour mark. And at this point it was so late, I was like, I'm going to go to bed. So I decided that we would do a second test where I really could show you guys the timing of this to really give you a good idea of like how this actually works. So this is the next morning. Okay. I kind of just let it cure overnight. So of course I know that this is fully cured. There's no tackiness whatsoever because I've let it sit the typical 8 to 12 hours that it would take for this formula of epoxy to cure. But we're going to go ahead and do a second test where I'm going to show you guys the actual timestamps of when I'm coming out to check this. So you can really kind of see and really get a good idea of how, this product is working or how it works, okay? We're also going to test this in a mold because that was the other thing I wanted to test. Like tumblers are one thing, right? Especially because it's raised up. It's much closer to the heating element, but I was curious as to how this would perform with epoxy inside of a mold, okay? So we're going to go ahead and mix equal parts of our Flynn Sister epoxy. Again, we're using the Artist Cure. Of course, we're mixing up another 30 mLs. Now, we already have a decent layer of epoxy on this tumbler, so I know I'm not going to need the entire 30 mLs, so we will use this extra or additional epoxy to pour into our mold, okay? So now we're gonna go ahead and just quickly epoxy our cup here and get that second coat of epoxy on here. I'm gonna add probably a little less than half, maybe 15 mLs, so about half of that 30 mLs that we mixed up of the Artist Cure epoxy onto this cup to give it a nice thin coat again. So again, enough epoxy that it is slick to touch with my gloved hand, but not so much epoxy that it is literally pulling off the sides as I go around, okay? So once we get this part epoxied, or this tumbler, I should say, epoxied, we are going to go ahead and put a little bit of glitter inside of the rest of the epoxy, so what is left, so that we can add this to a mold, okay? So the mold that I'm going to be using is a handle mold that I got way back when from the Tipsy Magnolia, so it is particularly for their, it's the same shape as all of their handled cups, most of their handled cups, sort of that rounded handle, which I do enjoy. So we are going to add the epoxy that I have left to this mold, and I'll kind of show you the process here. I haven't done a handle tutorial in a while, so I will definitely add that to my list of things because I have had a few people asking, but we are going to go ahead and add the rest of this to this mold as I've mentioned. So we're going to add the same glitter that I use on the bottom of this cup to the pot of epoxy we have left. So this is Gore from Batty Glitter. So we're going to add that to our epoxy here, get it thoroughly mixed. I'm not stirring too fast that we're going to introduce too many bubbles, but of course bubbles are inevitable when you're adding things and when you're working with epoxy in general, but the slower you stir, the less likely you are to introduce additional bubbles. So because we're using a mold, and obviously heat is not recommended on a mold, we are going to use 91% rubbing alcohol to thoroughly spray my mold, and that is just to make sure that when I put the epoxy in this mold, that we are going to sort of pop the bubbles on contact, if that makes sense. So just something that I typically do. If you have something like else that you use, I mean, most people I feel like use rubbing alcohol as like their go-to, especially because this is not a flat laying like open mold. This is actually more of like an enclosed mold to obviously create the actual shape of the round handle. So the way that I fill this, I know is a little bit awkward, but we're gonna kind of hold open both sides and just kind of pour in the epoxy until it's filled. Now I do purposely overfill these because I want to make sure that the handle is full, you know, thoroughly filled. So I do go from the middle and then I'll do corner to corner just to make sure the very edges of that mold are filled with that glittered epoxy, but I will overfill this a bit so that it is kind of peeking out of the seam. And that is just so that I can ensure that I am getting a fully filled mold when this is all said and done, okay? So we've already put our turner in. I did take this back out to torch it because I realized I didn't show that on camera, but we're gonna go ahead and put this in the tumbler curing machine along with it. We'll go ahead and place that panel back, that acrylic panel, and we'll hit it on. It's 8:25 now. We're gonna come back in an hour. Okay, so it's been an hour, and we are going to go ahead and do a bit of a feel test for this. So once we pull the tumbler out, I am noticing that this is tacky. Now, this has only been an hour, so very similar to my first result, okay? This is tacky. Enough that I can touch it with my ungloved hand and feel fully confident. Now, the mold, was still very wet, very sticky, very stringy, so that's not quite ready. So we're gonna go ahead and put this back in, let it run for the next hour, and then come back and test and see how everything is going after the full 2 hours in the tumbler curing machine. 10:39. Oh my gosh, it's fully done. 1000% fully done. I literally can touch it. It's been 2 hours. Wow. Wow, that's actually pretty impressive. Fully done. Let's try this. Okay, this is not quite done. It's still like squishy, but this is only just tacky. So we're gonna leave that in for a couple more, another hour, and we'll see how long that takes. But this is finished. It's ready for decals. Well, yes, ready for decals and literally final coats. Wow. Done, 2 hours, artist cure, which normally takes in my climate anywhere from 8 to 12 hours to cure. So it has been 2 hours, or another hour, but it has turned off because it only runs for 2 hours at a time. It is a bit harder, but it still is malleable. So I'm gonna run it for another hour to 2 hours. But I think what we'll do is I'll unmold it. So like it still bends, which is what I don't want. So it looks good, but it's not 100% cured because it's still malleable, okay? Also something to note is that this kind of product, right, is not going to help with bubbles, okay? So just be mindful of that. A cup is different, but when you're doing something like molds, which has deeper, you know, more depth, you're going to want to make sure that you spray it really good with rubbing alcohol, whatever. And ideally you probably want something that's a flat surface versus something like this that kind of has it in an enclosed area, because the bubbles aren't going to have as much time to escape when you're using a longer cure epoxy. Okay. So just be mindful. Now for this purpose, it's just a handle. I'm not that worried about it. I just wanted to add something cute and wanted to try out a mold. But just be mindful that your bubbles aren't going to have enough time and space to release. So you may want to just keep that in mind. Put that back in there. We'll turn it on and we'll let it go for 2 hours. Okay, so that took another 2 hours to fully cure, and here's just a speed session of me putting the handle on the tumbler. So I wanted to take this time while this is curing and while you watch me disassemble this and tell you my kind of final thoughts on this product. So do I think that this product works? Yes, it definitely does. It got my tumbler done in 2 hours flat, and I didn't believe it enough that I needed to run the test a second time. So yes, really impressed with that. What I'm not impressed with is the fact that molds are going to be a little bit more difficult. Now, I haven't tested a flat lay mold like I have my coaster molds currently in there, so I'll definitely give you my thoughts on those when I test those. But something else to keep in mind when you're doing an enclosed mold like I did with the handle is that because this is speeding up the process of your epoxy curing, you know, the bubbles don't have a lot of time to release to the top and then pop. So just something to keep in mind, especially because you're not applying heat to something like a silicone mold so you don't damage your mold. So just keep those things in mind. I do think that it's ideal for me in the fact that I work on YouTube and make content for YouTube. So this is really going to speed up the process for me. I also like that this is easy to store. I can take it apart. I don't have to have a space for it. I literally can just put it wherever I want when I'm not using it. So that is definitely a game changer for me. There wasn't a lot of instructions, so I guess that's kind of one of those things that was a little bit of a Debbie Downer. But I do think that it's easy and simple to use. It isn't going to take a lot of, brain power, I guess, to be able to use. But that would have been something that would have been nice as well. So I hope that covered a lot of your questions. Definitely feel free to let me know if you had additional ones. I did put the link to this product in the description box down below. But if you have questions, please feel free to leave those in the comment section and I will answer any and all of them either in a short video or just responding to your questions in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will catch you guys in the next one.